Hey, Zaka family! Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Mary Beth Sales, who is a PR expert and commentator. Mary Beth, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate it. Mary Beth Salas here. It's great to be here. Good morning.
Mm-hmm. It's a pleasure to have you on the show because I know there's a lot of great things that you're going to be expressing with the audience. And I definitely want to know a little bit more about the Web3 space that you're working on, things like that. But before we, get into where you are currently, I want to know a little bit more about your journey and where you come from. But let's start off a little bit more of your cultural background and where's your family from and where did you grow up?
Oh, okay. So check it. I'm Filipino American. My parents are straight from the Philippines. They came to the US in 1972. So I'm a first gen American born in Missouri, St. Louis, Missouri, to be specific.
Oh, wow. Missouri. How was it growing up in Missouri?
I mean, St. Louis is great. Okay. It's like real talk. Okay. So to be honest with you, like it was fine and normal and I was okay. And it's just, I'll put it this way. Remember those standardized tests we used to take when we were little? Like you fill in the bubbles.
Oh, yeah. With the number 2 pencil, nothing else.
That's right. And I remember like we had to put in our first name and our last name. And I just remember putting in my first name. I was like, oh, my first name's two words. There's no space for that. And then last name. And then whenever it would ask for ethnicity, it would like back then it would say Black African American. Then it would say like white Caucasian. Then it would say Asian Pacific Islander. And then it would say other. And I remember staring at those bubbles and I would be like, I don't know what any of this means. I used to put white up until like I was 9 years old because in St. Louis, all I knew was black and white, right? And I never knew the answer. My parents never brought it up with me at the time. And it wasn't until like fourth class when a fellow classmate asked me, or no, I asked him, and he happened to be Indian, like Indian American. And I was like, what do you fill in? He was like, Asian Pacific Islander. What do you fill in? And I'm like, white. And he was like, you're supposed to do Asian Pacific Islander. And I was so confused. And I went home and I asked like, Daddy, how come Asif was telling me to put in Asian Pacific Islander? And he was like, well, anak, which means my child in Filipino and Tagalog. And he goes, you're American and that's all that matters. And so like I grew up in St. Louis, thinking I'm just American, like everyone else, like a girl named Kelly and a girl named Katie with blonde hair and blue eyes, and I never knew I was different until people started pointing it out. Like, are you from China? That's where my toys are from. I never took offense to it. But like I was little, when you're little, like kids say the damnedest things. So I just would go home and be like, why they ask me if I'm from China? And my parents, my dad especially, he would always say like, you're American and that's all that matters. You know what I mean? So like,
shout out to your pops.
Right?
For real. Like that was like a very nice way of saying stuff to make you be like, okay, I'm American. Okay, I'm just gonna leave now and go back to playing games now, toys.
Yeah, it's just like I appreciate it because at the end of the day, he never instilled any type of inferiority in me or superiority in me, right? To have any type of complex. But other than that, like I thought it was just so weird because like being Filipino in St. Louis, we used to drive 30 minutes like to this place called J Asia Supermarket or whatever, okay, like in the city to go buy our rice. And which is so different. Like when I moved to California when I was 21, I was like, oh my God, they have rice cookers at Walgreens. That's so weird, or like I'm like, there's, you can go get rice like just across the street at any store. So like little things like that, I didn't know were such a big deal until I left. So
Now,
major difference.
you mentioned your father a lot at that point. Obviously, you said your parents as well, but I know growing up, obviously there was a lot of values and core values that were brought up inside of the house that possibly your parents instilled in you growing up to influence you in your career. Like, what were some of those values?
Oh man, my dad always said the word discipline. So I'm like tearing up right now. This is like kind of emotional. My my dad would always say like discipline, right? And he would always say discipline, discipline, discipline. He would actually make me look up that word in the dictionary. He was very big on the dictionary. So when I was like 8 years old, Paul, he gave me my first book. Okay. And you know, when you're little, like your first book might be like, I don't know, Goosebumps or
Of course.
Book. Okay. He gave me How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I'm like, I know. And so I remember he's like, I'll give you $100 if you read this book. And I, kind of read the book, as an 8-year-old. But that's just how he raised me. You know what I mean? And he was he just wanted me to be, he saw it in me, whatever that it was in me, and he knew I was going to be a leader. So like he would get so excited when I ran for student council as a kid, when I ran for student council president in high school, and he told me to he told me to be a diplomat. Be disciplined and be a diplomat. He taught me to I don't have enemies, but if someone comes across as one, befriend them. He was just that guy.
He's definitely sound like he had like some Mr. Miyagi mindset.
He really did. Right?
Like really like the mindset of like, I'm not gonna teach you, you're gonna learn on your own, but I'm gonna give you some words of advice. So when that time does come, you make the right decision. Learn like that book. I could just imagine reading a book like that at that young age and being like, How to Win Friends. You're like, but I have friends. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
so one of the greatest examples was I remember I came home, and I'm just gonna make up a name for this. So I came home one day and I was like, Daddy, Katie wouldn't share her Mr. Sketch markers with me. You know those smelly markers that would smell like fruit when we were little?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, she has a 6-pack of Mr. Sketch markers. She wouldn't share them with me. He took me to the store and he bought me a 12-pack of Mr. Sketch markers. And he gave that to me and he said, I want you to go to school tomorrow and share these with me. Right? And I was like, why? She doesn't share them with me. So I shared them with her. And after school that day, I went home. I was like, Daddy, I shared my markers with Katie, and then she was really, really nice to me. And he goes, see, you're learning. And I'm like, oh, and like that started at such a young age. And let me tell you, when that starts at a young age, like it just sticks with you forever.
It clicked. See, your father was definitely very wise. Like in doing that, especially doing it at a young age where you're very where things influence you very easily, right? He could have easily been like, you know what, she doesn't want to share with you, honey, just stay away from her, right? And that's probably like the easier route, right? But your father, like you said, instilled the word discipline, and like obviously with discipline comes like consistency, struggles. All those words are gonna manifest from that. And for him to be like, look, babe, let's go buy you this. And he didn't even have to buy it, right? He could have just been like, look, it's okay. You don't even need the markers. He was like, no, I'm going to buy it for you, but not to buy it where you're not humble. He still humbled you out by saying, I'm gonna buy this, but I still want you to share. Versus like, I want you to go back and show her that you got more markers than her. You know?
Yeah.
And that would be like not the ideal, but I mean, a thought process that would cross somebody's mind. Like, look, you don't need her markers, baby. Here's your own, and you got 12 of them. You got 6 new markers than she does. And then, kids grow up like that. But for him to say, go share with her, it's moments like that in your life that kind of like inspired you to do what you do. Now, growing up in St. Louis, and then I know you moved to LA. Right, that's a massive difference. But I know you went to law school. Like, what interested you in law school? Like, did someone inspire you to do it? I know you talk about your father, your parents. Were they involved in that?
Yeah. So, obviously my father was the biggest influence on me, and he studied law in the Philippines, and he just saw it in me. Okay. He saw it in me that I could speak. He saw it in me that I always attempted to persuade. He saw it in me that I would, bring reasoning to the table in order to do something or get something. And he just kind of groomed me that's all I knew, and also like, I mean, I'm sure that there are children of immigrants out there who are like, oh, so you get it. So did your parents, ever make you be a doctor, a lawyer, or a nurse or an engineer? And, and like a lot of the times we'll get the answer like, yeah, me. Um, it was just ingrained for me to do it. I really didn't know any other path to take at the time. I did drop out of law school, after a year. I was accepted in a 2-year accelerated program in California. Law school is usually 3 years, but I honestly, I didn't have the discipline to stay. Like, discipline's not my forte. Even though it was instilled in me, I do my best to like work hard. I execute well when there's fire under my ass, but like the consistency with discipline is something I still work on every day,
Mm-hmm.
And it was a struggle because, have you ever had this experience where you want to please your parents and do right by them because that's just kind of like, I don't know if it's that guilt or,
you also see them struggling to make it happen for you. So you kind of feel obligated to, if they're providing and doing it and sacrificing for themselves to just make sure.
Yeah.
Like,
what do you do when you grow up hearing like, we came to this country in 1972 with 2 luggages, 1 in each hand, and $500?
I walked to school with no shoes, and then I washed my feet at the doorstep, and you're saying here like, wow, I got 10 pairs of sneakers in the closet.
That's what I'm saying.
And you really think twice. You're like, wait, hold up. All right, Dad, Mom, I'm sorry. I do apologize. I'm gonna go to school. I'm not gonna complain. They put it into perspective. Maybe some of those stories were exaggerated. I ain't gonna lie, but they definitely had an emotional impact on us that made us think for a second. Like, you know what? We owe it to them in a sense. But I think the thing that, that needs to happen is that it's not about just owing it to them. It's owing it to them in the way you could owe it to them. Maybe law school wasn't the thing for you. Maybe it was something else, but you had to, go to law school to figure it out and then find the next thing. And obviously I know your parents are definitely very blessed to see the person you have, grown up to be and stuff. But again, you had to find your own lane. And that's sometimes a hard thing, especially with immigrant parents. They're like, no, you need to graduate. You need to go to law school. You need to be a doctor because that's all they know. And then, when you switch the ropes up, the roads up, it kind of like puts a little damp on them. Like,
it scares them.
Yeah. Like my daughter's not following the lead. Like we're providing so much to her in order for her to have a better life than us. But the better life doesn't mean what you want me to do. The better life is me being happy and being able to give back and contribute in the way I can and the way I best.
Yeah, that's the part that's hard. I've always found like, I didn't probably, let's say there were 60 kids in my graduating elementary school class, right? And I think I was one of, 2, maybe 3 children of immigrants. And so like the majority of people I grew up around with, like, they didn't understand, you know what I mean? Like, they thought it was intriguing or fascinating or foreign that, like, my parents were born in another country. You know what I mean? They're like, they weren't born here. Whoa. And to me, it was just normal, obviously. But I guess one thing that I grew up with that you might relate to is that we kind of grew up with, I don't know, was it like certain expectations or cultural obligations? It's something I haven't really been able to articulate much, but it's just there,
Mm-hmm. Now, when you went out to law school, right? That's a very big accomplishment. Even though you chose a different path along the way, like, how did you feel? Like, what are some of the challenges you faced being a woman of Pacific Island background, going to law school, trying to figure out like this career path?
Oh man. I mean, first of all, I don't know. I just, as just being a female, this was disclosure. This was like what, 2008. And for anyone listening, there definitely is a difference between 2008 and 2018, 22 now. So, I think I was intimidated. I'm not going to lie. Like, it was intimidating. I kind of got coined the name legally Filipina, right? Like, I did well. I was smart. I remember taking the first exam. It was constitutional law at the time. And I remember I got a B, okay, like the letter B, A, B, C, and I got a B. And I recall someone saying, there is no way she got a B. I had scored in the top 30% of my class. And I don't know, maybe it was because I like to be a little bit stylish or fashionable, or sometimes I wore heels to class. I kind of got this expectation that perhaps I wasn't smart. And so that was one thing, but I kind of went along with it, and I rolled with that, expectation or lack thereof. But it was different. It was, oh man, this is kind of hard to talk about. Like, that was the first time I've ever been like around more diversity that you can't see. Okay. So like, when we think about diversity, it's about like the outside sometimes, like what we look like. Are they Black? Do they have dark hair? Or do they have medium skin tone? You know what I mean? But this time it was more so like diversity of backgrounds and upbringings. Like, it was the first time I'd ever been around, instead of being at a Catholic school, like probably half my class was Jewish. And so I was just like, wait, there's a holiday, you know what I mean? And so that was different to me. I had learned, I remember being asked this question, like, oh, what is median income to you? And being in LA, people were like, oh, upper middle class means you make $400,000 a year. And I was like, wait, what? And so that was a different aspect of diversity to me, just like people talking about their views of money. And I kind of grew up thinking like, okay, you're okay if you make like, I don't know, $100,000 a year. That was just different to me. And it was kind of intimidating. I don't know why. I don't know.
Well, I think personally, when it comes down to like you pushing through that again comes back to where your father was talking about determination. Like, there's a lot of like, especially when you're in an environment where it is that competitive, where you have to put the work in. I think that's something to take away from that, is that the fact that you made a choice, and that choice was to, I think this is when you just went to the public relations area. This is when you left school? Was this when you started to pick up public relations?
Yeah. So, okay. So I remember this is how it started. I loved fashion. Okay. I still do. I have an eye for just kind of like visual styling. Right. And I started skipping school to do wardrobe styling. And I remember doing it for this magazine, and I started styling talent for their photo shoots, to be featured in this magazine. And one day when I was on set, the editor was like, oh no, I don't have, none of my reporters can show up to a red carpet. And I said, I'll do it. Like whenever there was an opportunity I wanted, I would jump on it or fight for it. Like I would go get it, because if Mary Beth wanted something, I would go get it. And so I went to this red carpet, and, you know, the job was to interview celebrities, you know, with certain questions, whether it was about their favorite cupcake flavor or what charity that they're working with. And that is something I love to do. So I started going to these red carpets, skipping school a little bit more, and interviewing celebrities. And interviewing celebrities, I would meet publicists. Sometimes they were these mean, grumpy people standing behind these celebrities saying, no, no more questions. Or, you know, oh, Mary Beth, you're with this magazine. So-and-so has a film coming up. We'd love to get them featured. And I'm like, this is all publicists can do. I can do that. And that is how I started my PR career. I was 24 when I decided that, launched it when I was 25.
Were you still in school at the time?
That is right when I dropped out. Sorry, Mom and Dad. But yeah, that's right around when I dropped out. I woke up one day with, I see, the story always goes back to like remembering what our parents told us. We came to this country with $500. I woke up one day with like $87 in my bank account, and I was like, I'm going to be a publicist. I used, I think, my last dollars to make a .com at the time, make some business cards, and I just had to make it happen.
So that's woof, $87 in the bank account and still having a dream. You know, to have that same mindset when you're at a low like that, to then be like, and especially the transition where you're like, I'm in law school. If I stay on this path, you know, it's kind of like, obviously nothing's promised, but you know, at least you had a path. This is like, I got to make one.
Well, here's the thing. I knew that if I dropped out of law school, my parents weren't going to be supporting me, whether it was financially, emotionally, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So like, if I were to take a different path, I knew I had to figure it out myself, you know? Yeah. So there was definitely fire under my ass.
So when it comes down to this whole public relations, what, like, could you tell us like an achievement that you accomplished during this time? Like, what is one of the most proudest moments you had?
Yeah. So I guess for just to break it down for maybe people who are unfamiliar. So public relations, right? If I had to put it in easiest terms, people are like, what's that? Is that marketing? Is that, you know, it's establishing or maintaining narratives about your client, whether it's a brand, an organization, or an individual, and to help the public perceive them in a certain way. Right. So, you know, whether you have a client that if they have a new movie and you want to promote that, and you want to, you know, make sure that your client is known as like the nice guy next door who's doing well in film, or if it's a professional athlete and they, you know, you want to get them in the limelight a little bit more to be perceived or seen as a philanthropic individual, right? So that's like what PR is. I think one of my biggest accomplishments, I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to represent Greg Louganis, who is a Olympic gold medalist, right, for diving. And the year that his Wheaties box came out, I put together his Wheaties breakfast, and being able to walk him down the red carpet at the ESPY Awards was probably one of the greatest things in the world. Like an Olympic gold medalist, right? Someone who's the best of the best in what they do. Someone who exudes like discipline and talent and success in itself, and then just being surrounded by other athletes who are the best of the best. And I remember the night before the ESPYs, it was Dwayne Wade and his wife who were at the ESPY party event the night before. And when D Wade asked, can I get a picture with Greg? And I'm like, oh man, I just got to ask the reverse. Do you get what I'm saying? Like that was cool. That was a dope moment, you know?
Well, shots to those Wheatie boxes. I remember growing up, those things was like popping.
Yes.
When you saw your favorite athlete on the box, you were like, look, if they eat these Wheaties, I got to eat the Wheaties.
Right.
It was like, it was convincing you. I remember seeing all these athletes and being like, well, I guess athletes don't eat, Cocoa Pebbles. They actually eat Wheaties. No matter how bad they taste or how good they would taste, you're like, look, athletes eat it, so I got to do it. Now, you work in a very competitive industry, and I know that there's obviously a lack of diversity within the industry and stuff like that. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, yeah. Real talk. So what's ironic about this is, as a publicist, I'm the one who's always prepped people with questions and maybe how to maneuver around challenging questions. And now I'm on the reverse side. So it's so interesting to me. So I specifically worked in entertainment, AKA Hollywood, and sports, but I'll talk about Hollywood. Hollywood's it's dog eat dog. I'm not going to lie. And there is a type, and especially I'll call us PR girls, because that's what it is. There are men in it as well. But yeah, there's definitely the Hollywood type. And oh man, I can't believe I'm confessing this. I remember seeing another Filipino publicist and I'd be like, oh, there's another one of you. Oh my God. You know what I mean? It was kind of like being in college again. Like like in St. Louis, what is that Asian girl doing at this bar? Like I'm supposed to be the only one, because I felt like there was competition enough. And then unfortunately, when I saw my own kind, I felt that as a threat a little bit. I know that sounds messed up, but that's just reality. I mean, that's the truth.
That's it's crazy how, well, it's not even crazy. It's just the thought process of like seeing someone that you're in a growing industry, and to not see someone that speaks like you, knows the culture of you. Like obviously you might feel like alone, but then you find someone that is someone similar to you, and you already think of competition in a sense. Well, and that's probably obviously the industry, convincing you that you got to do the same thing. You got to be the best of the best.
Well, I mean, is it because growing up, I thought like, okay, so real talk, when I want to say we for some reason, but I don't want to say we because maybe it doesn't apply to everyone, like applying to colleges, right? I knew that there were a lot of Asians at UCLA, and I knew that there weren't a lot at Midwestern schools, so like I would take advantage of it when I applied. And then if I didn't get accepted into a university that I wanted, I was like, fuck, maybe there are too many Asians, and like that was something that was always sitting in my head. I was like, oh man, do they max out the quota? Like I always thought there would be like a limited amount of space, and I never saw that as like a terrible thing. I don't know why, but kind of, I guess I carried that with me a little bit subconsciously, like, wait, there can't be another, Asian or Filipino publicist. And maybe that's why I thought that, because I felt like there was some kind of competition to begin with, and it was like, oh no, I gotta like fight that quota thing, I don't know. I wonder if like other people even realize that was ever a thing for some people.
The thing, I mean, that's a really good question. You got me thinking about that. In your time of growing in the industry, obviously there's some goods and some bads. Could you give us an example of like one meeting or a situation you probably were involved in where you felt uncomfortable? Uh-oh.
I mean, okay.
Without saying any names.
No. So like,
I'll play with you. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just like here's a textbook one. So I also come from the era of Hollywood pre the Harvey Weinstein things, like pre-sexual harassment, where like sexual harassment was normal, and any type of harassment, verbal harassment, like whether you're a guy or a female, like it was kind of standard. It was like every day. It was almost like a hazing process. And if you couldn't get through to it, you just probably maybe didn't belong working in Hollywood. And so I remember back in the day, I was representing a client, and I was in a meeting at I guess you would call it a production company, maybe. And I was the only female in there. And I remember being asked in front of my client and in front of this person's colleagues, from that company. And they're like, Mary Beth, what are you? And I knew what he was getting to. And I said, I'm a publicist. And he's like, no, like, what are you? American? And he's like, I mean, what are you, like, Asian or what? I was like, I'm Filipino. And he is like, I'd love to get up in some of that. And I'm like, but me, just like, because back then you or I or we didn't fight that stuff at the time during that era. And I was just like, well, let's just get this deal done and then we'll talk about that later. Because that was the only way to maneuver around situations like that. Like, you never, like, when you're trying to close a deal or make something happen, you don't just call that person out. Like, so, today there's like a zero tolerance, thing with stuff like that. But back then it was just like maneuver. And so, like, that was normal. I was like, yeah, I guess that's just part of the game, being, Asian looking and a female. So I'll never forget that one.
And it obviously kind of keeps you on your toes in that type of conversation. It's sad to say that, people abuse their power, within the industry, to get what they want or to try to influence people to do certain things. But, you got to stay in your ground. And I think that's something that a lot of the guests that recently on the show that are in some capacity to some industry always mention about staying true to themselves and not like favoring because other people are doing that, in this industry. Like, what kept you grounded, from not like losing your center and your knowing who you are?
That's a tough one. I mean, at the end of the day, I never let go of the fact that I'm Mary Beth from St. Louis, Missouri, the daughter of art and joy. I never let go of that. Like, the little things were my escape. Like, I remember putting out email, like, what do you call those? Auto response emails saying, hi, I can't take your email right now because I'm watching the St. Louis Cardinals playoff game, and like, I would kind of use that as an excuse to get away sometimes, or just sift out people I didn't want to deal with because I knew they would take it humorously. Like, or, oh, that girl's cool because she watches baseball. But I did that almost as a defense mechanism because, yes, I would watch baseball and hell yes, I love the St. Louis Cardinals, but it was more so like I had to find creative ways to kind of gatekeep myself in a way, even though I wanted everyone to be accessible to me and I wanted access to everyone else. But I had to find, strategic ways to kind of control, flow of communication sometimes.
Okay. Now, I know that you've been featured in several different publications, some very big ones. Like, could you talk a little bit more about, like, seeing yourself in those publications? Like, obviously growing up, you probably seen those publications at some time, right? But then to actually be featured in it, doing what you love now, versus like being being that lawyer that you didn't want to be, if that was the case. Like, how did it feel to see yourself in those publications?
So, okay, I've actually never thought about this before. I remember growing up, my dad would always say, whatever you do in your life, be an expert at it. whatever you do, maybe write a book on it, like be the best at it. And so I was reached out to by a writer from Money Magazine, by Time. And, I was asked to give some expert commentary on what I thought, about professional athletes. How do you make amends, or what do you do when something, you do something wrong in the public eye? Like, how do you come back from that? And I was able to give examples of that to the writer from money.com. And I remember when I saw my quote in there, and it said PR expert Mary Beth Sales. And I was like, whoa, that is so awesome. And I remember showing that to my dad. I was like, look, Daddy, I'm an expert in what I do. And it was at that moment, like, I felt like I accomplished what I wanted to do and what I love to do. And I also was able to show my father, like, look, I became an expert in what I do. And actually, I was coined that, a few years before that, when I was on Entertainment Tonight, being interviewed on camera, in my late 20s, as a PR expert. Oh man, when I showed that to my dad, and I'm like, look, Daddy, and my face was on national TV, my words were on national TV, I was heard on national TV, my name was on there, Mary Beth Salas, PR expert. And that was like a defining moment. Like, I became an expert in what I do. And because my dad always said, whatever you do, be one of the best at it and be an expert, and then become someone who speaks on it. And I never, talking on TV or being in a magazine, being a PR expert commentator was never like, I didn't write that down and say, I have to do this, this, and that. It came to me, and now I understand why my father always told me, be an expert at anything you do. So that was awesome.
That's a very wise thing to say, like, to be an expert and then talk about it, write a book about it. Like, your father was thinking of like the various different layers to it. Somebody's like, oh yeah, I just want to be a basketball player, but learn how to be a coach. And then from being a coach, learn how to be an owner of a company, right? I mean, of the team. Like, there's different layers to it. And sometimes, depending on our mindset and where we grow up, our backgrounds, in a sense, sometimes we limit ourselves based off of that. We're like, you know what? That's just not for me. I can never see myself doing that because there's not enough of me in that environment. But when you start to go from the ground level up and build yourself up, you're like, oh, well, it's not that hard. It's just connecting the dots, and I'm in this lane, and it just keeps on evolving. So I think the industry is a great way of kind of testing that. Now I know that I've seen that you're hosting a lot of like Web3 conversations on Twitter. There's a lot of conferences. You're doing a lot of breakdowns on Web3. Could you break down in layman's term, like, what is that to the listeners?
What is Web3? Okay, so this is the easiest way. This is not the true definition, but this is the easiest way to comprehend. So, back in the day when our parents were like, what is this online thing? What are you doing online? Why do I need Facebook? What's .com? So that was Web 2, and Web 3 is just the next level. It's Web 2 with a combination of a new form of web, which is called, or a new form of technology, which is called the blockchain. It's just another type of technology. And with Web3 comes cryptocurrency and the digital assets that roll with it. So sure, JPEGs, pictures, things you can collect, but they're just digital. So that's the easiest way I can put it. But a term that you'll hear a lot is NFTs, which stands for non-fungible tokens. So best way for that is like, okay, you have the Mona Lisa. All right, I have an NFT. Mine's just a digital version of an asset that's collectible or could be worth money. So that's the easiest way that I try to explain it.
And how important it is to know about that stuff nowadays?
Subjective, right? Some people think I'm crazy for working in it. I see it as the present and the future. It's kind of like, I'm sure that years ago when our parents were like, yeah, that's such a waste of time. We don't need Facebook. We don't need Twitter. And all of a sudden, in the early 2000s, you see people making money and careers off of being on Instagram or being some kind of blogger or a vlogger with videos. And so I tell people, I'm like, how there are a lot of kids playing Roblox at the age of 8, 9? I'm like, that's essentially the next generation. Like, they will grow up in Web3. They are growing up in Web3. They know what NFTs are because they are playing with it. They are exchanging, they buy these tokens and they trade them in for game assets. Like, that is the essence of Web3, in my opinion. And so what's interesting is if you ever go on Twitter, you will find 14-year-olds talking about this more eloquently than a lot of adults. And so because I'm early in it, I think it's important because I know the presence of Web3 and NFTs are, going to be mandatory and just existent in the near future. So why not just be a part of it now?
And how lucrative is something like this?
I mean, I tell people it's lucrative if you've got some street smarts and if you're lucky at the same time.
Okay, yeah, all right. It's one of those things that obviously you have to have an eye or a passion to kind of like dive in and kind of be consistent, because you got to be consistent in order to really like see those things through.
I mean, did you ever collect sneakers?
Oh yeah, of course. I got a whole sneaker collection.
So like, you ever stand out in line for some like Tiffany's or like some SBs or Air Forces? Okay, so I call it kind of like a bigger digital version of that. So like, back in the day, I remember getting some Tier 0 Nikes, and people were like, why do you do that? They're just sneakers. It's kind of the same thing. Like, some people, made it a lucrative business and then they ended up opening their own shops. And it's kind of like that. NFTs, like, why are you doing that? They're just pictures. Like, they're just files on a blockchain. And it's similar to that. It's the people in the community who create the value to these items, right? Nike didn't say like, oh, these J's are going to be $10,000. The community and the collectors created that value, right? So it's very similar to that.
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously, it's something that you said like it's evolving, and if people have an interest in it, they should definitely jump on it. But you definitely have to know what you're doing. You got to do the research. Just don't. It's just like anything. When it comes out, there's going to be a big hype about it. There's going to be a lot of misconceptions, because everyone has their own opinion on it and stuff. But my last question to you is like, do you have any advice for young women of diverse backgrounds that want to get into PR? Like, what would you recommend for them in regards to like some key words of advice to help them?
Well, let's see. Like 8 years ago, I would have said, if you're working in PR, particularly entertainment, sports, Hollywood, if someone harasses you, just put on your lip gloss, say thank you for sharing that, and say, what's the next step I can take to help you, right? Obviously, times have changed a little bit more. That was just my nice way of saying, like, you're going to get shit and you're going to get harassed, but just figure out how to maneuver around it and just stand your ground. Today, I would say, honestly, the same thing. I would say take the time to pick and choose who you want to work with whom you want to work, right? You don't have to work in everything and you don't have to work with everyone. I think that, any job can be stressful. If you want to go into an extremely stressful industry like Hollywood or entertainment, like, you actually have a choice to pick whom you want to work with, right? And when you have that vibe, you're able to just have a little bit more peace of mind and like have control of your emotional stability and your financial and mental stability, right? Like, you do have a choice, even though sometimes we tell ourselves, like, I don't have a choice, I have to do this. Like, you do actually, and a lot of people forget that. So just remember, you always have a choice to pick who your flock is and who's around you, and it's and playing politics, if you want to call it politics, or being diplomatic, like, it helps, right? I mean, I don't know if you call that faking, but being diplomatic helps.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Mary Beth, I just want to say thank you again for taking the opportunity to just be on our show today and sharing a lot of these gems and breakdowns, all the goods and the bads. And shout to your parents, shout to Pop Dukes. I know he had a lot of that wise wisdom that he shared with you at a young age, and it obviously, helped you along your journey. And the fact that you started off at law school, you were leaving school to go work, doing something that was totally different, that just goes to show you, like, the determination that you have. And like you said, any opportunity that came your way that you really wanted, you went after it, right? And I like what you said about your father, about being an expert at what you do. I think that is very, very important, because, if you're gonna do anything, right, wouldn't you want to be the best in your own way, not better than the person next to you, but just better in your own way? And I think that's very helpful to all the listeners that are listening. And again, thank you for this, your time and just sharing all that information with us today.
Yes, thank you, Paul. And I do want to thank Arthur T. Salas and Carol Joy Salas for making me who I am. And thank you for having me today.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And to the listeners, if you want to hear about more inspirational stories like Mary Beth, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect, and follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcasts.